morning sun rose slowly over Atlanta, painting the streets in shades of gold and gray. Marcus Hill started his day the same way he always did, with a cup of strong coffee, a quiet prayer, and a deep breath before work. He was a delivery driver, and while the job wasn't glamorous, he took pride in it. He knew every alley, every shortcut, and every customer's name on his route. People knew him too, always smiling, always on time, always ready to lend a hand. That morning he checked his schedule and saw a large order marked Priority, Technodyne Engineering Corp. The name sounded familiar. He had made deliveries there a few times before. It was a big company that worked with machines and robotics, a place filled with smart people, expensive equipment, and lots of rules. For Marcus, it was just another stop. At least that's what he thought. As he loaded the boxes into his truck, his coworker joked, "You going to fix another robot today, Marcus?" They laughed. Because Marcus had a habit of noticing things others didn't. Once he spotted a loose valve at a warehouse before the staff did, saving them a flood of oil. He never bragged about it. He just said, "Sometimes you see what you pay attention to." The drive to Technodyne took about 40 minutes. The roads were quiet except for the hum of his truck and the sound of a gospel station playing softly on the radio. Marcus loved mornings like this, calm, steady, predictable. He didn't know that this would be the day everything changed. When he arrived, the huge silver gates of the engineering facility stood open. Security waved him through. They knew him by name. Inside, the parking lot was full of luxury cars and service vans. But as Marcus stepped out, he could feel something was off. The usual buzz of activity was missing. The air felt tense. Workers were gathered in small groups, whispering, looking frustrated. He walked toward the main building, pushing his dolly stacked with boxes. Through the glass doors, he could see a crowd of engineers gathered around a massive machine, taller than a car, glowing with blue lights and wires. Their faces showed panic. A man in a white lab coat walked past, mumbling, 3 days and nothing. 3 days and 15 engineers can't get it running. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Sounds serious, he muttered to himself. Inside, he met the receptionist, who looked more stressed than usual. "Morning, Marcus," she said, forcing a smile. "Just dropped the delivery near the testing floor." He nodded and rolled the boxes down the hall. As he got closer to the machine room, he could hear voices, sharp, frustrated, overlapping. "Check the power relay again," one shouted. "It's not the relay, we already replaced it twice." Another snapped. "We're losing thousands every hour, this thing's down," a manager yelled. Marcus stopped at the doorway, quietly observing. He wasn't an engineer, but he had a curious mind. Machines fascinated him, not because he studied them, but because he understood them. Growing up, he used to fix cars with his uncle, taking engines apart and learning how every piece connected. He didn't have a degree, but he had instincts. And instincts don't come from school. He stood there for a few seconds, watching the machine. The lights flickered in an odd rhythm, and a faint clicking sound came from its base, a sound nobody else seemed to notice. "Strange," he whispered. "Hey, delivery's over there," an engineer barked, snapping him out of his thoughts. Marcus nodded politely and set the boxes down where he was told. But his eyes kept drifting back to the machine. Something about that clicking bothered him. It was like an offbeat drum. Wrong, out of place. He finished unloading and went to sign the delivery slip. The manager, a tired-looking man with messy hair, scribbled his signature and sighed. "Man, I swear this thing's cursed. 15 people, 3 days, and we still can't figure it out." Marcus smiled slightly. "Maybe it's just hiding the problem in plain sight." The manager gave a weak laugh. "You sound like my engineers. You want to take a shot at it too?" Marcus chuckled, but part of him was thinking, maybe I could. As he turned to leave, he looked one last time at the machine. He noticed something. A tiny sensor near the corner, shaking slightly with every vibration. It was barely noticeable, but it didn't look right. He hesitated. Should he say something? He wasn't an engineer. It wasn't his place. But then again, what harm could it do to mention it? He stepped closer to the manager and said calmly, "Hey, I'm not an expert or anything, but that sensor down there, and it looks a little off. Might be the reason it's not syncing." The manager frowned. "The sensor?" "We checked all of them," Marcus shrugged. "Maybe, but that one looks like it's not sitting straight. Could be throwing off the signal." The manager looked at him for a moment, a delivery driver suggesting what 15 engineers had missed. He gave a half smile. "I appreciate the thought, man. We'll take a look. Marcus nodded, tipped his cap, and headed back toward his truck. But as he walked out, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just noticed something important, something everyone else had overlooked. Back in his truck, he started the engine, but before driving off, he looked in the rearview mirror toward the building. I hope they check that sensor, he said quietly to himself. Sometimes the smallest thing makes the biggest difference. He didn't know it yet. But that simple comment, that small act of curiosity, was about to turn him from an ordinary delivery driver into the man who solved what 15 engineers couldn't. And soon, everyone at Technodyne would be talking about him. Inside Technodyne Engineering Corp., the air was thick with frustration. The large machine in the center of the factory, a complex piece of technology worth millions, sat silent. Its metallic body gleamed under the fluorescent lights, but its purpose was dead. It hadn't worked for 3 days. Every failed attempt to repair it made the air heavier, the mood darker, and the people more desperate. The machine wasn't just another piece of equipment. It was the heart of the company's new project, one that promised to revolutionize industrial automation. Big investors were watching closely, and every hour of downtime meant another pile of money slipping away. Managers had been pacing the floor, engineers buried in blueprints, technicians running tests over and over again. 15 of the company's top engineers had been assigned to fix it. They were the best. Graduates from top universities, people with long resumes and titles that looked impressive on paper. Yet, despite all their training and technology, the machine refused to cooperate. One of them, a man named Dylan, slammed his wrench on the table. I've checked the sensors, the wires, the circuits, everything. He shouted. It's not a wiring issue. It's like the whole system just gave up. Another engineer, Clara, rubbed her temples. We've replaced the power modules twice. The readings don't make sense. The data says it's working fine, but it's clearly not. Their supervisor, Mr. Benson, walked in with a stern face and a clipboard in hand. What's the update? He asked in a sharp tone. Silence. Dylan sighed. We still can't get it running, sir. Mr. Benson's jaw tightened. 3 days, 15 people, and not one of you can figure this out? Do you realize how much this is costing us? The room fell quiet. Everyone stared at the floor, feeling the weight of his disappointment. Then the CEO, Ms. Harper, a tall, calm woman with sharp eyes, entered the room. When she appeared, everyone straightened up. She didn't yell. She didn't have to. Her presence alone demanded results. Talk to me, she said simply. Clara stepped forward. We've gone through every diagnostic, every test. We've even replaced the system drives. Nothing changes. Ms. Harper studied the machine. So it's not mechanical? Not exactly, Dylan replied. It starts for a few seconds, then shuts down automatically. No error code, no overheating. It's like the system doesn't know it's broken. That makes no sense, she said quietly. Mr. Benson sighed. At this point, I'm starting to think we'll need to call the manufacturer. Ms. Harper crossed her arms. And wait another week? We don't have that kind of time. Our launch is in 5 days. Investors are flying in tomorrow for a demo. The tension in the room grew unbearable. No one had an answer. As this heated discussion went on, a security guard opened the door. Delivery's here, he said. A tall man in a blue uniform stepped inside, pushing a dolly stacked with boxes. It was Marcus, the delivery driver from earlier that morning. He moved quietly, not wanting to disturb the chaos. But even from across the room, he could feel the stress radiating off the engineers. He glanced at the silent machine. It looked powerful, a massive structure of steel and light. But now it just sat there lifeless, humming faintly like a heartbeat trying to return. As Marcus unloaded the boxes, he couldn't help overhearing their conversation. Dylan groaned. I swear this thing's mocking us. The sensors are perfect. The logic boards are clean. The voltage is stable. There's no reason it shouldn't work. Marcus looked up for a moment, then back at the machine. The faint clicking he heard earlier was still there, rhythmic but uneven. Click, click, pause, click. To him it sounded like a timing issue. He didn't know the science, but he knew sound. Working around engines and mechanical parts all his life, Marcus had learned that machines talk, just not with words. The engineers, however, were buried in data screens. Numbers, charts, and digital readings filled their monitors. Nobody was paying attention to the sound. Mr. Benson rubbed his forehead. All right, everyone take 5. Maybe a short break will clear our heads. As they stepped away, Marcus stood near the delivery counter watching. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but curiosity tugged at him. He had a habit of noticing things others didn't, small details that didn't fit. One of the engineers, Clara, sighed and looked over at him. "You ever seen a grown man argue with a machine?" She joked weakly. Marcus chuckled. "Can't say I have, but I've seen engines act stubborn before." "Oh yeah?" she said, raising an eyebrow. "You fix engines?" "Used to," he replied. "My uncle taught me. He always said machines are like people. When they stop working, you gotta listen before you fix." Clara smiled faintly, not realizing his words would soon become prophetic. Behind them, Ms. Harper stared at the motionless machine. 15 of our best minds, she murmured, and we're still stuck. How can something this advanced be so simple? No one had an answer. Meanwhile, Marcus gathered his clipboard, signed the receipt, and started walking back toward the exit. But just before leaving, he turned around one last time. The sound of the machine still echoed in his mind, that offbeat clicking like a heartbeat out of rhythm. He looked at the engineers, then at the small sensor flickering on the machine's lower panel. It wasn't glowing the way it should. It was slightly tilted, almost shaking with the vibration of the motor. Marcus frowned, whispering to himself, "That can't be right." And with that single thought, simple, honest and unnoticed by everyone else, a chain of events began that would soon leave the entire company in disbelief because the man they overlooked, the one who wasn't even supposed to touch the machine, was about to solve what 15 engineers couldn't. The air inside the factory felt heavy, almost tired. Machines hummed softly in the background, while the broken one stood silent in the center like a defeated giant. The engineers gathered again after their short break, carrying coffee cups in frustration in equal measure. They looked at data sheets, graphs, and screens filled with codes, but nothing made sense. Marcus, who had finished his delivery paperwork, lingered for a moment near the exit. He didn't plan to stay, and it wasn't his place. But that sound, that faint, uneven clicking from the machine, it bothered him. It was quiet, but his sharp ear caught it again, faint and stubborn like a heartbeat trying to find rhythm. He turned slightly, pretending to check his dolly, but his eyes were on the machine. Inside, Dylan, one of the senior engineers, Baga, was losing patience. "We've replaced everything," he groaned. "Every part that could fail has been replaced. What's left, magic?" Clara sighed. "Machines don't break because of magic. There's something tiny, something we're not seeing." Mr. Benson walked in again, tapping his pen against his clipboard. "Find it," he ordered flatly. "Because if we don't have this running by tomorrow, the CEO will have my head, and yours too." The team went back to work, running more diagnostics. The large display screen showed green signals across the board. Power supply, sensors, drives, all normal. But the machine still refused to start. Marcus couldn't help himself. He moved a little closer quietly, staying out of the way. His eyes scanned the base of the machine, the panels, the lights. That's when he noticed something strange. A small sensor, round and silver, tucked into the corner, flickered unevenly. It wasn't broken, but it was shaking slightly every few seconds. No one else seemed to notice. Marcus tilted his head. "That can't be right," he whispered to himself. He thought about the cars he used to fix with his uncle years ago. His uncle always said, "Engines don't break without telling you first. You just have to listen to what they're saying." Maybe, Marcus thought, this machine was doing the same thing, talking through that tiny vibration. He glanced at the group of engineers. They were too busy arguing over readings to notice. One of them said, "We need to recalibrate again." Another replied, "No, the system logs are fine." The conversation circled endlessly, like a song stuck on repeat. Finally, Marcus took a small step forward. "Excuse me," he said quietly. The room went still for a second. 15 engineers turned their heads toward him. The sight was almost intimidating. A man in a simple blue uniform standing before a crowd of experts in lab coats. "What is it?" Dylan asked, trying to sound polite but clearly annoyed. Marcus hesitated, then said, "I'm not an expert, but I think that sensor on the left side, it's not sitting right. It's shaking when it shouldn't." Clara frowned. "Which one?" "That one," Marcus said, pointing. "Bottom left near the base. You can see the reflection flicker when it moves." The engineers exchanged glances. Some looked curious, others skeptical. One man whispered, "He's a delivery driver." But Clara crouched down beside the machine anyway. She stared closely at the sensor Marcus mentioned. It was indeed trembling, just barely, but enough to catch her attention. "Wait," she said slowly. "He's right. This sensor's misaligned. The reading says it's fine, but look at it. It's shaking out of sync with the motor." Dylan blinked. "That's impossible. The system should have detected that." "Maybe not if the error's mechanical, not digital," Clara said. Mr. Benson walked over. "Realign it," he ordered. Two engineers got their tools and adjusted the sensor's position carefully. Marcus stepped back, not wanting to get in the way. They tightened a few screws, checked the connections, and realigned the small circular lens until it was still. "Okay," Dylan said. "Let's restart it." Everyone held their breath. The engineer pressed the button. The machine whirred to life, slowly at first, then steadily, like it was waking up from a long sleep. Lights flashed across its panels, the humming grew deeper, and a soft blue glow filled the room. It worked. Clara's eyes widened. "No way." Dylan laughed in disbelief. "It's running. It's actually running." Mr. Benson stared at Marcus, astonished. "You saw that?" he asked. Marcus smiled shyly. "Just a lucky guess, sir, but it wasn't luck. It was instinct, the kind that comes from years of real hands-on experience, the kind textbooks can't teach." The engineers gathered around, still trying to process what had happened. 15 trained experts, hundreds of tests, and not one had thought to look instead of just measure. Ms. Harper entered the room, drawn by the noise. "What's going on?" she asked sharply. The engineers stepped aside. Dylan spoke up. "It's fixed, ma'am. The alignment issue was causing the failure." Her eyes narrowed. "You fixed it?" Dylan hesitated. Then he turned and pointed toward Marcus. "No, ma'am." He did. Every head in the room turned toward Marcus. He stood awkwardly near the wall, hat in his hands, unsure what to do. Ms. Harper looked at him for a long moment, then said, "What's your name?" "Marcus Hill, ma'am," he said quietly. She smiled faintly, a look of genuine respect in her eyes. "Well, Mr. Hill, you just did what 15 engineers couldn't in 3 days." Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "Guess I just saw what didn't look right." Ms. Harper nodded. "Sometimes the smartest eyes are the ones that aren't trained to overlook the obvious." Everyone in the room stood there, speechless. A delivery driver had just solved their $1 million problem with a single observation. Marcus didn't gloat, didn't brag, didn't even stay for the praise. He simply tipped his cap and said, "Glad it's working again. I'll be on my way." And as he walked out of the building, the sound of the machine running smoothly behind him filled the air. Steady, strong and alive. No one said it out loud, but everyone in that room knew it. That day they hadn't just witnessed a fix. They had witnessed brilliance hidden behind a blue delivery uniform. The room was still humming with disbelief. The machine, that massive, stubborn, expensive piece of technology, was now running perfectly, its rhythm steady and alive. For 3 exhausting days, 15 engineers had tried everything they knew. And yet all it took was one delivery driver's quiet observation. Everyone stood there, frozen for a few seconds, as if their minds were struggling to catch up with reality. The engineers exchanged looks, half amazed and half embarrassed. The managers whispered to one another in disbelief. Marcus Hill stood by the door, his delivery receipt still in his hand, not realizing he had just made history inside that building. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He had just seen something out of place, something his instincts wouldn't let him ignore. Ms. Harper, the CEO, walked closer to the machine, watching its lights blink in perfect sequence. "It's flawless," she murmured. Then she turned to her team. 3 days and not one of you noticed that misalignment?" No one answered. Clara looked down at her tablet, pretending to check readings. Dylan rubbed his neck awkwardly. They weren't angry, and they were humbled. Mr. Benson finally spoke up. "We all assumed the sensors were fine because the system logs didn't show any errors. We trusted the software more than our eyes." Ms. Harper glanced toward Marcus, but he trusted what he saw. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean to step on anyone's toes," he said quietly. "I just noticed it moving weird." The CEO smiled. "You did more than notice. You solved it." Marcus chuckled nervously. "Well, I guess I just got lucky." But Ms. Harper shook her head. "No, Mr. Hill, that's not luck. That's insight, the kind that can't be taught. The engineers nodded slowly. Deep down they knew she was right. They had been trained to think logically, to follow numbers and systems. Marcus, on the other hand, had listened to the machine, not through equations but through intuition. He had heard its heartbeat when no one else was listening. The head engineer, Dylan, finally walked up to him. "You saw what we couldn't. That's impressive, man. I guess sometimes the smartest mind is the one that's not stuck inside the blueprint." Marcus smiled modestly. "Maybe it just helps to step back sometimes. You look too close for too long and you miss what's right in front of you." Everyone laughed softly, and for the first time in 3 days, the tension in the room lifted. The machine hummed smoothly, as if proud to be running again. Clara, still amazed, asked, "How did you even notice that, Marcus? You're not an engineer." He thought for a moment before answering. "When you work around machines all the time, trucks, engines, gears, you start to hear things. A sound that's off, a rhythm that's wrong. It's like when a singer hits the wrong note, you feel it." His words were simple, but they hit deep. Everyone in the room felt it. It wasn't just about fixing a sensor. It was about the way he saw the world, not through calculations, but through observation, patience, and experience. Ms. Harper nodded, clearly impressed. "You've got a gift, Marcus. The kind of mind that sees connections others overlook." Marcus smiled shyly. "I don't know about that. I just pay attention. Maybe that's the real secret," she said softly. A few minutes later, she called her assistant. "Get me HR," she said. "I want to make sure this man doesn't leave before we talk properly." Marcus looked confused. Ma'am? I still have a few deliveries to make." She smiled. "Don't worry. They can wait. You've already delivered something far more valuable today." The room chuckled. As the engineers reset the system and ran a few more tests, the machine continued working perfectly. The vibration was gone, the readings were stable, and for the first time the company's new project was back on track. Mr. Benson leaned toward Ms. Harper. "Ma'am, if he hadn't shown up today, we might have had to delay the entire production launch." Ms. Harper nodded slowly, "And we would have never known the real problem. Isn't it strange? We build machines that think, but we forget to think like humans." Marcus, meanwhile, stood quietly near the door, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. He wasn't used to attention. He just did what felt right. He never expected anyone to thank him for it. But inside him, something was shifting. For years, he'd been told his job was small, that real intelligence belonged to people with degrees and titles. Yet here he was, standing in a room full of experts, and he was the one who made the difference. For the first time, Marcus felt something powerful. Validation. Ms. Harper walked over to him once more. "Mr. Hill," she said kindly, "I'd like to invite you back tomorrow. We could use your perspective on a few other systems. You seem to have the kind of eye this place has been missing." Marcus blinked, surprised. "You want me to come back?" "Yes," she said, smiling. "Sometimes the best ideas come from the people no one's listening to. I want to change that." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right, ma'am. I'd be happy to help." "Good," she said. "Then we'll see you tomorrow." As Marcus left the building, the engineers watched him go, each one thinking about what had just happened. He wasn't just a delivery driver anymore. He was proof that brilliance doesn't need a badge or a title. Outside, Marcus climbed into his truck. The city lights shimmered in the distance, and the hum of his engine felt different tonight. Steady, proud, alive. He smiled to himself and whispered, "Guess Uncle Joe was right. Machines do talk if you listen close enough." And as he drove away, the world around him seemed quieter, calmer, as if even the city itself had stopped to admire the moment of insight that had changed everything. The next morning at Technodyne Engineering Corp felt different. The air wasn't heavy anymore. The usual tension that filled the lab had turned into a buzz of excitement. Word had spread quickly, faster than anyone could have imagined. "Did you hear about yesterday?" One technician whispered. "Yeah," another replied, shaking his head in disbelief. "A delivery driver fixed the prototype." The delivery driver. By the time Marcus Hill arrived for his morning drop-off, almost everyone knew his name. Some were curious, some were skeptical, and some were quietly humbled. He didn't expect the attention. To him, it was just another day, another route. But when he stepped through those glass doors again, the way people looked at him had changed. "Morning, Mr. Hill," Clara called out, smiling brightly. "The hero of yesterday's disaster. Marcus chuckled. Hero? I just pointed at something that looked funny. Well, that funny thing saved us $1 million, she said. He laughed softly, still trying to understand why everyone was making such a big deal about it. To him it was simple. He saw something out of place and said something. But to them it was unbelievable. How could a man without an engineering degree, without fancy tools or training, solve a problem 15 experts couldn't? As he walked toward the lab, a small crowd followed him. The machine he had fixed was running perfectly now, humming smoothly, producing flawless results. Every light blinked in perfect sequence, every reading on the monitor stable. It was like it had never been broken at all. Dylan, the senior engineer, met Marcus halfway. You're right on time, he said, grinning. Ms. Harper's been waiting for you. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Waiting for me? Uh-oh. I didn't break anything this time, did I? Dylan laughed. No, quite the opposite. She wants to show you something. They entered the lab where the CEO, Ms. Harper, stood beside the now functioning machine. A few journalists and photographers were also there. Apparently, the story had leaked overnight. Mr. Hill, she said warmly, turning to him. Glad you could make it. He tipped his cap politely. Morning, ma'am. She gestured toward the machine. It's been running continuously since your fix. Not one glitch. Our investors saw the test this morning, Mung, and they were amazed. Marcus smiled. That's good to hear. She stepped closer. We're all amazed, Marcus. 15 engineers couldn't find the problem, but you did. How does it feel to be the man who saved a multi-million-dollar project? He rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. Honestly, ma'am, I just feel lucky I was standing in the right spot. Her smile widened. No, it's not luck. It's observation. It's instinct. And that's something this company values. The engineers gathered around, clapping softly. Even those who had doubted him the day before joined in. Dylan gave him a playful pat on the back. Guess we'll be taking notes from you next time, Marcus. Marcus laughed. Now you guys are the real experts. I just listened to machines. One of the reporters stepped forward. Mr. Hill, people online are calling you the mechanical whisperer. What do you think about that? Marcus blinked, surprised. They're calling me what now? The reporter chuckled. Mechanical whisperer. The man who listens to machines when engineers can't. The story's everywhere. Marcus didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to attention, especially not this kind. I don't know about all that, he said humbly. Machines talk to everyone. Most people just don't listen long enough. The room went quiet for a moment. His words were simple, but they carried truth, the kind that people feel deep down. Ms. Harper smiled, impressed. You know, Marcus, we could use someone like you here. Not as a driver, but as a consultant. Someone who helps bridge the gap between human understanding and mechanical design. He blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. You mean work here? Like actually here? She nodded. Yes, you've proven that insight doesn't need a degree. It needs heart. And you've got that. Marcus hesitated, looking around at the rows of machines, the engineers in their lab coats, the shiny floors. It felt like another world, one he never imagined belonging to. I don't know if I'd fit in here, he said softly. Clara stepped forward. You already do. The engineers nodded in agreement. Even Dylan, who once dismissed him, said sincerely, You taught us something yesterday, that sometimes experience beats theory. For the first time, Marcus allowed himself to smile fully. He looked around the room and at the machine he'd saved, the faces now filled with respect instead of doubt, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. Ms. Harper extended her hand. So what do you say, Mr. Hill? Ready to make this official? Marcus looked down at her hand, then around the room one last time. Slowly, he reached out and shook it. All right, ma'am. Let's fix some more problems. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Marcus stood there, half shy, half amazed at how quickly life could change. Yesterday, he was just a man delivering boxes. Today, he was standing beside CEOs and engineers, being praised for something that came naturally to him, paying attention. As he left the lab later that day, he walked past the now quiet machine and placed his hand on its cool metal surface. You and me, he whispered with a grin. We showed him, didn't we? Outside, the sky was bright and clear. He climbed into his truck, still in disbelief about everything that had happened. But deep inside, he knew one thing for sure. It wasn't just about fixing a machine. It was about proving that genius can wear any uniform, even one with a name tag and delivery logo. And as his truck rolled out of the parking lot, every person inside that building knew they'd never forget the day a humble driver reminded them what real intelligence looks like. The following week at Technodyne didn't feel like the same company anymore. The energy in the air had shifted. People smiled more, spoke softer, and worked harder. But the biggest change wasn't in the machines, it was in the people. For the first time in a long while, the engineers weren't buried in pride or competition. They had been reminded that intelligence comes in many forms, and sometimes it wears a delivery uniform. Marcus Hill had returned, not as a visitor this time, but as someone the company genuinely respected. When he walked through the front doors, the security guard grinned and said, "Morning, genius." Marcus laughed, shaking his head. "I'm no genius, man. Just lucky." But even he knew it wasn't luck anymore. Something bigger had started. Inside the lab, Ms. Harper was waiting for him. "Marcus," she said warmly, "come in. We've got a few people who want to meet you." He followed her to the conference room. To his surprise, several executives were there, and not just from Technodyne. Representatives from other firms had come to see the man who had solved what 15 engineers couldn't. Cameras were set up, microphones placed neatly across the table. He froze for a moment, adjusting his cap nervously. Ma'am, am I in trouble?" Everyone laughed softly. Ms. Harper smiled. "Not at all. You're here because the world wants to hear your story." "Story?" he repeated, confused. "Yes," she said. "What you did reminded people that education is important, but observation, awareness, is priceless. You saw something machines couldn't calculate. We want people to remember that." A journalist leaned forward. "Mr. Hill, can you describe the moment you realized the problem?" Marcus rubbed his hands together, thinking. "Honestly, I didn't realize anything. I just listened. The machine was making a sound it shouldn't. I figured maybe something was shaking that wasn't supposed to." "So it was instinct?" the reporter asked. "Yeah," Marcus said simply. "My uncle used to fix cars. He told me machines are like people. When something's wrong, they tell you. You just have to care enough to listen." There was a long pause. Everyone in the room smiled, not because his words were fancy, but because they were true. When the press conference ended, Ms. Harper introduced Marcus to the engineers who had been working on the project. Dylan, Clara, and the rest of the team came forward, each shaking his hand. Clara said softly, "You didn't just fix a machine, Marcus. You fixed how we see our work." Dylan nodded. "You reminded us that technology means nothing without humanity behind it." Marcus smiled shyly. "Well, I'm just glad it's running again. That's all that matters." But Ms. Harper wasn't done. "Actually, Marcus," she said, "we'd like to offer you something more permanent. We're creating a new division, Field Insights. We want people who understand machines in real-world settings. You'd be our first consultant." Marcus blinked. "Consultant like a real employee?" "Not just an employee," she said proudly. "A leader, someone who teaches others to look differently." He didn't know what to say. For years, Marcus had been told he wasn't qualified enough. He'd applied to mechanic shops before and been turned down because he didn't have the right paperwork. No diploma, no license, no certificate. But now people with master's degrees were calling him the expert. He looked down at his hands, rough, calloused, marked by years of hard work, and smiled. "I'll do it," he said quietly, "if it means I can help others see what I see." That night when Marcus got home, he sat on the steps of his small apartment, thinking about everything that had happened. His neighbors waved, smiling proudly. "Hey, TV star!" one shouted. Marcus laughed. "Don't start that now." But deep down it felt good. Not because of the fame, but because for once people saw him for what he truly was. Later that evening his phone buzzed. It was a message from Ms. Harper. "Tomorrow we're honoring you at the company ceremony. Dress nice, and be ready for surprises." The next day the Technodyne auditorium was packed. Employees from every department gathered, clapping as Marcus walked in. A banner hung above the stage, celebrating everyday genius Marcus Hill. As he stood there, Ms. Harper took the microphone. "We live in a world where we measure intelligence with titles, grades, and degrees. But today, one man reminded us that wisdom comes from paying attention, from truly listening, not just thinking. Marcus Hill reminded us that brilliance isn't about what's on paper, it's about what's in the heart. The audience erupted in applause. Some of the engineers even stood, cheering for the man they once overlooked. Marcus's eyes glistened as he stepped up to the podium. He looked out at the crowd, hundreds of faces staring back at him, and took a deep breath. "I don't know much about speeches," he began, smiling nervously. "But I do know this. You don't need to be rich or educated to make a difference. You just need to care about what you're doing. Machines, people, life, everything has a rhythm. You just gotta listen to it." The room fell silent, then exploded in applause again. Some clapped, some cried, and some smiled with new understanding. After the ceremony, a little boy approached Marcus shyly. "Mister," he said, "I want to be smart like you when I grow up." Marcus knelt down, smiling warmly. "Then promise me one thing," he said. "Don't just look, see, don't just hear, listen, that's where smart starts." The boy nodded, eyes shining. As Marcus left the building that day, his heart was full. He had started the week as a delivery driver, invisible to most. Now he was leaving as a symbol of something far greater. Proof that real intelligence isn't about status or schooling. It's about curiosity, courage, and the will to pay attention when everyone else has given up. And as he stepped outside, the sunlight hit his face just right. Marcus looked up, smiled, and whispered to himself, "Guess I delivered more than a package this time." The video went viral overnight. Someone from the press conference had recorded the moment when Marcus said, "Machines talk to everyone. Most people just don't listen long enough." Within hours, that single sentence had flooded social media. It was replayed, quoted, and shared millions of times. People all around the world watched the clip of a humble black delivery driver standing before a room of engineers, explaining how he'd solved what no one else could. By morning, hashtags were trending everywhere. Marcus Hill. Listen to the machines. Everyday Genius. News anchors told his story on TV. Bloggers wrote about him. Radio stations called him the man who reminded the world what common sense really means. Even celebrities tweeted his quote with clapping emojis and lightning bolts. Marcus didn't even know at first. He woke up late that morning, thinking it was just another workday. When he turned on his phone, it was buzzing nonstop. Hundreds of messages, missed calls, and notifications. His best friend Reggie called first. "Bro, you're famous!" "You're on the news," Marcus laughed. "Stop playing, man." "Famous, me? I'm serious," Reggie shouted. "They're calling you the mechanical whisperer." Marcus sat there, still half asleep, staring at his phone in disbelief. His face was everywhere, on videos, on memes, on news headlines. And yet what people loved most wasn't the fix itself. It was him, his humility, his calmness, his words. By the time he reached Technodyne that day, cameras were already waiting outside. A crowd of journalists surrounded him as he stepped out of his truck. "Mr. Hill. Mr. Hill," they shouted. "How does it feel to outsmart 15 engineers?" He smiled modestly. "I didn't outsmart anyone," he said. "We just saw things from different angles. I listened to the machine and they listened to me. That's teamwork." The reporters were stunned. No arrogance, no showmanship, just truth. Inside, Ms. Harper met him with a proud smile. "You've started something bigger than you realize, Marcus," she said. "People are calling, wanting to collaborate, wanting to learn from you." "Learn from me?" He chuckled. "I barely made it through high school," she laughed. "You don't need a diploma to teach wisdom. What you gave this world was perspective, the kind money or education can't buy." Later that afternoon, Marcus was invited to speak at a community event in Atlanta. It was held at a local youth center, the same kind of place where he used to hang out as a teenager, back when he dreamed of being a mechanic. The hall was packed with young people, parents, and teachers. The crowd erupted in applause as he stepped up to the small stage. He looked around nervously, cleared his throat, and began to speak. "I ain't no genius," he said, smiling shyly. "I'm just a man who pays attention. See, people think you gotta be rich or have a degree to be smart. But real intelligence? It's curiosity. It's noticing what others miss. It's caring enough to look twice when everyone else walks away." The room was silent. Every eye was on him. He continued. "When that machine broke, I wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. I just saw something that didn't look right. That's all it takes sometimes. One small observation, one moment of care, to change everything." You don't have to be special to make a difference. You just have to see. A wave of applause filled the hall, echoing through the walls. Kids in the front row were cheering. Parents were nodding, some wiping away tears.